The mythical Dark Fleet was real, and now Earth's cursed armada of death was in the hands of the most unpredictable, belligerent species in the galaxy, humans. Ambassador Lennox's eyes widened as he read the sensor report again, his hands trembling. Sheliak long-range sensors had just detected dark energy surges near the Forbidden Nebula, on a scale that shouldn't be possible. "How can this be?" Lennox whispered hoarsely, fear and disbelief etched on his gray features. Around him, the Galactic Council's ornate chamber erupted into worried murmurs as the other ambassadors absorbed the grave news. The scheming Sheliak had led the Council for centuries in restricting human expansion, keeping the upstart species contained to a handful of star systems, citing their warlike nature and lack of restraint. Humans were too dangerous to let loose upon the galaxy with advanced technology, Lennox had always preached. But now humanity's brightest minds had done the unthinkable. They had discovered the derelict alien fleet that the Council had tried so hard to erase from history. Ships of unimaginable power, with physics-defying dark energy drives, inertial dampeners, and quantum shields that rendered them nigh invincible. Every civilization that had tried to claim the fleet in the past had been mysteriously wiped out. The ships were cursed, it was said, an abomination that shouldn't exist. And the humans had spent decades secretly studying and reverse engineering this forbidden technology right under the Council's nose. What the Council had long deemed impossible, Earth had dared to make real. Humanity's most elite soldiers and powerful AIs now crewed the newly christened Cursed Fleet, and it was powering up its ancient weapons as it quantum leaped toward Galactic Council space. Patrick Hicks, the unparalleled human tactician chosen to lead the Dark Armada, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Damnation's Hammer. His console chimed as it displayed their first target, a critical Council outpost housing the planetary shield generators that protected a dozen of the Council's core worlds. Hicks narrowed his eyes grimly as he studied the readouts of the outpost's defenses, which had always been impenetrable to humanity's outdated ships, but not anymore. Humanity's very survival depended on the Cursed Fleet's success today. This was their one shot to smash the Council's stranglehold and carve out a place for humans among the stars. If Hicks's ships failed to breach the Council's defenses, not only would the Cursed Fleet be lost, but the Council would trace it back to Earth, and then all of humanity would pay the ultimate price for their insolence. "All ships prepare to engage. Initiate quantum phase shift on my mark." Hicks's voice was hard. "Today we either unleash hell upon our oppressors or we die trying. For Earth." The Cursed Fleet, the darkest myth of the Galactic Council, had just become its greatest nightmare, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Space itself seemed to shatter as the Cursed Fleet tore its way back into real space at the edge of the Arcturian outpost. On the station's bridge, Commander Lennox gripped the edges of his console, his knuckles pale gray. The sensor readings couldn't be right. Those dark energy signatures, the impossible power output levels. It had to be a malfunction. But as he watched the human ships emerge from the swirling rifts of their quantum slipstream jump points, their hulls unmarred and crackling with unnatural energies, a cold dread settled in his gut. The derelict fleet of myth was real, and it was here. On the bridge of the Nemesis, Patrick Hicks allowed himself a grim smile as the Arcturian outpost swelled in the view screen. The once invincible bastion of Council power suddenly looked so small and fragile before the might of humanity's Dark Armada. "All ships engage combat protocols," Hicks ordered, his voice hard. "Bring quantum shields online and prepare firing solutions." The Cursed Fleet surged forward as one, ancient weapon systems thrumming to life. The Arcturian defenses, the most formidable in Council space, responded instantly. Plasma beams and antimatter missiles streaked toward the human ships and splashed harmlessly against the shimmering barriers of their quantum shields. Lennox felt his world tilt as he watched the Council's most advanced weaponry fail utterly before the humans' impossible technology. This couldn't be happening. It defied centuries of military doctrine, millennia of physical laws. But it was happening, and if the Arcturian outpost couldn't stop the Cursed Fleet, Return fire, Hicks commanded, his voice cold and steady. The Nemesis shuddered as its spinal railguns hurled dark energy lances across the void. The other Earth ships followed suit, adding their own barrages of singularity torpedoes to the onslaught. The lances pierced the Arcturian shields like they were paper, while the torpedoes punched through hull and bulkhead before collapsing into raging black holes, twisting corridors and decks into unrecognizable ruin. Linux could only watch in numb horror as the pride of the Council's defenses crumbled before his eyes. Fires raged in a dozen sections, atmosphere venting from gaping wounds, bodies tumbling into the void. If the humans could do this to the Arcturian outpost, what chance did the Council's core worlds have? "I want that station secured yesterday," Hicks growled. "Deploy the Marines." Assault shuttles erupted from the Nemesis hangar base, rocketing toward the crippled outpost. They slammed into the station's hull, disgorging squads of armored Marines into the smoke-choked corridors. Grav boots clamping to the decks, rail rifles raised, the Marines advanced with ruthless efficiency. Sheliak defenders, their nerve already shattered by the devastation wrought upon their station, were no match for the augmented human soldiers in close-quarters combat. The Marines moved from deck to deck with lethal precision, securing key systems and data cores. Desperate Council troops were mowed down by flechette storms or crushed by powered gauntlets, their weapons unable to penetrate the Marines' armor. In mere minutes, it was over. The surviving Sheliak were herded into airlocks as prisoners, while the Marines withdrew with their prize, the outpost's primary data core, packed with priceless intelligence on Council fleet movements and planetary defenses. As the assault shuttles docked with the Nemesis once more, Hicks nodded to his comm officer. "Scuttle it." The human fleet pulled back, and a salvo of antimatter warheads streaked from the Nemesis tubes to slam into the ravaged outpost. Linux, fleeing the destruction in a battered shuttle, could only watch as the Arcturian outpost vanished in a blinding flare of light and radiation. Rage and humiliation warred within the commander as he set course for the Sheliak homeworld with all the speed his small craft could muster. The Council had to be warned. The humans, once considered mere primitives to be managed and contained, had just become the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. As the cursed fleet aligned into quantum slipstream formation, Hicks allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The first blow had been struck, and it had landed with all the force he could have hoped for. Earth's leaders would be pleased with this victory. But even as the ships prepared to jump back to human space, Hicks couldn't shake the sense that this was only the beginning of a much larger, much darker conflict. The Council would surely retaliate with all the might of a galactic superpower. And there were still so many unanswered questions about the cursed fleet's origins, the eerie circumstances of its discovery. If something had wiped out the original crews, could that ancient threat still be out there somewhere waiting? Hicks shook his head as the Nemesis led the fleet into the swirling rifts of quantum slipstream. Those questions would have to wait. For now, the first shots had been fired in a war that would reshape the galaxy forever. And humanity, armed with the darkest powers of the cosmos, would be at the center of the storm. The Doomlord's entropy beams tore through Earth's orbital defenses like paper. Patrick Hicks gripped his command chair as the Nemesis shuddered under the onslaught. Klaxons blared and smoke filled the bridge. "Shields failing! Hull breach on decks 3 through 7, his XO shouted over the din. Hicks keyed the ship-wide comm. "All hands, abandon ship. Get to the life pods now." The crew scrambled to evacuate as the Nemesis broke apart around them. Hicks was the last to board a pod, slamming the hatch shut as the ship's reactor went critical. The small craft jettisoned moments before the Nemesis exploded in a brilliant fireball. Hicks watched grimly as Earth's cities burned below, Sheliak ships swarming like locusts. The pod systems flickered and died, caught in the Doomlord's time-altering weapon. They plummeted through the atmosphere, the hull glowing red-hot. "Brace for impact," Hicks yelled. The pod slammed into sun-baked Earth, skidding to a stop in a cloud of red dust. Hicks kicked open the hatch, helping his battered crew out into the scorching Australian outback. A figure emerged from the shimmering heat haze. Captain Hicks, this way quickly. The man led them to a concealed bunker entrance. Deep underground, Hicks and his crew were briefed on the dire situation. Holographic displays showed major cities reduced to rubble across the globe. The council hit us before we could fully mobilize, a grim-faced general explained. But we have one last card to play. Hicks followed the general through armored blast doors into a cavernous hangar. His jaw dropped at the sight of massive warships unlike anything he'd ever seen, even more advanced than the Nemesis. "May I present the Apocalypse," the general said, gesturing to the largest vessel. "The crown jewel of our secret cursed fleet reserves." Hicks ran his hand along the obsidian hull, feeling the thrum of impossible power beneath. "Time to give the Sheliak a taste of their own medicine," he growled. Aboard the Doom Lord, Linux sneered as he watched another human city crumble. "Pathetic primitives. Why do they keep fighting?" "Sir, massive energy spike detected," a sensor officer shouted. Linux's smug expression faltered as familiar gravimetric signatures appeared on the tactical display. "Impossible." The view screen flickered to life, revealing Hicks's face. "This is your only warning, Sheliak. Withdraw now or face annihilation." Linux laughed. "You dare threaten me? Your fleet is destroyed, human." Hicks smiled coldly. "Is it?" The Apocalypse's main cannon fired. A stream of coherent singularities punched through the Doomlord's shields like they weren't even there. Micro-black holes blossomed across the massive ship's hull, warping space-time itself. Linux stumbled as entire decks were torn apart around him. He lunged for an escape shuttle, only to have debris slice through the engines. Trapped, he could only watch in horror as his invincible flagship disintegrated. In his final moments, Linux realized the true folly of the Council's actions. They had grossly underestimated humanity's resourcefulness and the apocalyptic potential of the cursed fleet's alien tech. The Doom Lord imploded, leaving behind only a hellish gravitational maelstrom. The remaining Sheliak ships fled in panic, their vaunted armada routed by a handful of human vessels. Hicks watched them go, his face grim. The Galactic Council had made a grave mistake in attacking Earth. Now they would learn what it truly meant to face humanity's wrath. The acrid stench of scorched circuits and melted alloys filled the Apocalypse's bridge as Patrick Hicks surveyed the damage. Sparks rained from shattered consoles and the groans of stressed metal echoed through the ship's superstructure. He wiped blood from a gash on his forehead, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Status report!" he barked. Lieutenant Chen, her uniform torn and singed, looked up from her station. Hull integrity at 43%. Life support failing on decks 7 through 12. Weapons systems offline. Hicks nodded grimly. "And the rest of the fleet?" "6 capital ships responding, sir. The others—" Chen's voice trailed off. The Battle of Saul had exacted a terrible toll. As Hicks watched, the remnants of the Sheliak armada limped away, their distress signals lighting up the comms like a swarm of desperate fireflies. "They'll be back," Hicks muttered, "and in greater numbers." He keyed the ship-wide comm. "All hands, this is Captain Hicks. Begin emergency repairs immediately. We don't have much time." Across Earth, frantic evacuation efforts were already underway. In the crowded spaceports of New Beijing and Lagos, civilians packed into transport ships, clutching what few possessions they could carry. The wails of frightened children mingled with the roar of fusion engines as ship after ship lifted off, bound for the relative safety of distant colonies. Days later, as the Sheliak reinforcements arrived in system, led by the colossal dreadnought Extinction, they found only empty space where Earth's defenders had been. Light years away, the Apocalypse emerged from quantum slipstream, flanked by its battered escort. Before them stretched an alien starscape, the debris of shattered worlds and ancient warships drifting in eerie silence. "My God," whispered Commander Reeves, staring at the central view screen. "What happened here?" At the heart of the cosmic graveyard loomed a structure that dwarfed even their largest vessels. A titanic ring, millions of kilometers in diameter, its surface scarred by weapons beyond human comprehension. As analysis teams began scanning the artifact, the ship's systems went haywire. Screams echoed through the corridors as crew members clutched their heads, assaulted by nightmarish visions. On the bridge, Lieutenant Chen's eyes rolled back in her head as she babbled in tongues no human had ever spoken. "Shut it down!" Hicks roared, smashing his fist against the emergency cutoff. "Isolate all networks, now!" But it was too late. The malevolent intelligence within the ring had already begun its work, turning ship against ship in a frenzy of destructive madness. As Hicks fought to maintain control, alarms blared. The Sheliak had found them. With most of his fleet tearing itself apart, Hicks knew there was only one option left. He input the override codes, feeling the apocalypse shudder as its reactors began to overload. "All hands, abandon ship," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "May God have mercy on our souls." The resulting explosion twisted space itself, obliterating everything for light years around. When the cosmic fire finally died, nothing remained but a haunting silence and the slowly evaporating remnants of reality itself. Days later, the handful of surviving ships limped back to Earth. As Hicks stepped onto the scorched soil of his homeworld, he knew humanity's innocence had been burned away along with that distant star system. The price of survival had been steep indeed, and the road ahead would be darker still.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.